All right, folks, welcome back to the range. You know, when it comes to handguns that are just plain built to last, you cannot beat a classic wheel gun. A good revolver with that solid frame construction, that simple, overbuilt for a reason action, these things are absolute tanks. And that robust engineering means they can safely chamber some incredibly potent cartridges. Now, a lot of folks might not realize there's a whole class of revolver cartridges that go way beyond practical. Their performance is, frankly, unreasonable for most defensive applications. Look, a good .357 Magnum that's going to solve 99% of the problems you are ever likely to face. But let's be honest, sometimes you just want to feel the boom. So today, we're going to run down some of the most powerful, ground-shaking, explosive revolver cartridges you can get your hands on. .357 Magnum. You know it's a serious list when the starting point is the .357 Magnum. This round was a complete game-changer. It was a joint project between Smith & Wesson and Winchester, and it officially landed on the scene back in 1935. This was the original Magnum handgun cartridge, and it represented a massive leap forward in power from its parent case, the .38 Special. We're typically talking about bullet weights from a light 110 grains all the way up to a heavy 180 grains. Now, depending on the specific load, and just as importantly, your barrel length, you're seeing velocities that are clocking in at 1,400, even 1,500 feet per second. That translates to muzzle energy in the 500 to 800 foot-pound range, which is just a monumental jump in power. It's that potent combination of high energy and high velocity that gives the .357 Magnum its well-earned reputation. It has the authority to penetrate deeply and stop a threat right in its tracks. We're talking about punching through heavy clothing intermediate barriers and still having the horsepower to get the job done. Its real-world effectiveness is perfectly documented. Sure, it's got some kick, but the K-frames, the L-frames, the Colt Pythons, the guns chambered for it were designed from day one to help you control that recoil. Because of this, the .357 Magnum became the legendary choice for personal defense, law enforcement, and even hunting small to medium game. It is known for its ability to carve devastating wound channels and achieve rapid, decisive incapacitation. For hunting, it's more than capable of cleanly taking down animals like white-tailed deer or wild boar as long as you respect its effective range. And the real ace up its sleeve? It can also safely fire 38 special rounds. That gives it a level of adaptability that almost nothing else on this list can really touch. You can train all day with lower-cost, soft-shooting 38 specials. You can load it with 38 plus P for a lower recoil defensive option, and then you can step up to the full house Magnum loads when you need maximum available power. .44 Magnum. Now we're taking a big step up. The ballistic performance of the .44 Magnum is borderline wicked, but here's the key difference. Unlike some of the really big bore stuff, the .44 Magnum has a ton of practical use. This makes it incredibly appealing for folks who need serious power, but don't want to carry something that feels more like a piece of artillery. This cartridge came about back in the 1950s, thanks in large part to the relentless work of the legendary Elmer Keith. The whole point was to deliver a level of power that the .357 just couldn't dream of offering. And for a long time, this was the most powerful handgun cartridge in the world. You're firing projectiles weighing between 180 and 300 grains. And you're pushing them at velocities that can still hit 1,500 feet per second. That's how you deliver muzzle energies that are topping 1,200 foot-pounds. Now, controllable is a very relative term here, but in a full-size, heavy N-frame like a Smith & Wesson Model 29 or a beast like the Ruger Redhawk, you can learn to run this cartridge properly. That power guarantees deep, bone-crushing penetration and a massive, devastating transfer of energy when it hits the target. It is incredibly effective against human threats and large animals. We are talking about quick incapacitation. Its large-caliber bullets create incredibly wide wound channels, while that high energy gives it plenty of penetration even through heavy muscle and bone. This is why the .44 Magnum is a staple for handgun hunters, going after medium to large game like deer, elk, and even black bears. It strikes a fantastic balance between raw, unadulterated power and manageability. You only need one good hit with a .44 mag. .480 Ruger. Now here's a cartridge that just does not get the limelight it deserves, the .480 Ruger. In terms of raw power and deadliness, this one really shines. It was practically designed from the ground up for wilderness defense and big game hunting. And that tells you pretty much everything you need to know about its capabilities. It was introduced back in 2003 by Ruger and Hornady. The goal was to create a cartridge that delivered massive stopping power, but without the absolutely punishing, brutal recoil of a .500 Smith & Wesson Magnum or a .454 Casull. Revolvers chambered for the .480, like the Ruger Super Red Hawk, fire large, heavy bullets, typically weighing between 275 and 410 grains. Velocities can exceed 1,300 feet per second, and that generates muzzle energies right around that 1,500 foot-pound mark. It really does find a perfect balance between sheer power and recoil, which makes it both formidable and practical. This cartridge is devastatingly effective at taking down large and potentially dangerous game. We're talking elk, moose, and big bears. Because you're shooting such a large diameter bullet, the wound channels it creates are massive. This means it can perforate deeply and inflict incredible catastrophic damage to vital organs. That capability is critical for a hunter or for someone who's just deep in the backcountry where stopping a threat immediately is completely non-negotiable. And unlike some of those bigger magnums, the .480 Ruger's recoil is more manageable. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to do quick follow-ups, but you can get back on target without feeling like your wrist just broke. .454 Casull. When you talk about sheer deadliness, the .454 Casull has to be in the conversation. Its ballistic capabilities are not something you can trifle with. And believe me, you do not want to be on the receiving end of this. The .454 Casull was the brainchild of Dick Casull and Jack Fulmer. It was developed for one purpose: explosive power. It absolutely eclipses the .44 Magnum. We are talking about muzzle velocities between 1,600 and 1,900 feet per second, and muzzle energies that are topping 1,900 foot-pounds with bullet weights ranging from 240 up to 360 grains. Those numbers are just unreal for a handgun. The .454 Casull is, flat out, one of the most powerful commercially available handgun cartridges. It offers superior energy transfer and penetration even at extended ranges. Now, what about practicality and daily use? Well, not much, but you would definitely want a .454 Casull revolver if you are dealing with large game or aggressive predators like wild boars and bears. The high-velocity nature of the Casull lets it penetrate deeply into muscle, break heavy bones, and just ruin vital organs. This is a cartridge that is guaranteed to incapacitate targets with extreme swiftness and destructiveness. But of course, the .454 Casull is not easy to handle. Its intense recoil and muzzle blast require a skilled and experienced shooter to control it effectively. Revolvers like the Ruger Super Red Hawk or the Taurus Raging Bull are designed with robust, heavy frames and porting to try and mitigate some of that recoil. But even with those features, the sheer power of this cartridge is still intimidating. .500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. I'm not kidding you. The .500 Smith & Wesson Magnum is something you should not fire if you aren't trained for it, or if you don't have rock-solid, proper shooting technique. This one isn't just a heavy hitter. This is a hand cannon. Its ballistic performance is extraordinary, and the devastation it can produce is on another level. This is a relatively new cartridge introduced by Smith & Wesson and Corbin back in 2003. This thing is arguably the most powerful production handgun cartridge that exists right now. I am talking about muzzle energies that shoot past 2,600 foot-pounds, and velocities that can reach 2,300 feet per second, especially when you're using some of those lighter projectiles. The kinetic energy it generates is just insane. Plus, it's an incredibly flexible cartridge firing bullets ranging from 275 grains all the way up to a 700-grain thumper. It is suitable for hunting the biggest game and defending yourself against extremely large predators. For two-legged threats? Yeah, I think this one qualifies as overkill. The actual damage that the .500 Smith & Wesson can produce, particularly in terms of tissue destruction and penetration, is off the charts. The large half-inch diameter projectiles are capable of making absolute wreckage in the wound channel. It will end a threat rapidly. If used for hunting, it can cleanly take down the largest game animals such as bears, moose, and even African dangerous game like Cape buffalo. The sheer energy transfer causes significant hydrostatic shock, which disrupts vital systems even if the bullet doesn't strike a critical organ directly. But this is not a practical choice for daily use. First, its recoil is simply punishing. Second, it requires a really large revolver to shoot it like the Smith & Wesson Model 500 built on their giant X-frame. But when it comes to raw, undisputed deadliness, the .500 Smith & Wesson Magnum is the one you should fear. That's our lineup for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video or just appreciate big bore content, please do me a solid. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to ring that notification bell, and drop a comment down below. Let me know which one of these is your personal favorite. Those clicks really do help the channel a lot. Stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, it's not just about the shot, it's about mastering the craft.